You're listening to Wildlife Control Consultant, where we provide research-based information on all things related to vertebrate pest management. Hi everyone, Stephen Vantassel here, Wildlife Control Consultant, bringing you another episode of the Wildlife Control Consultant podcast, where we cover all things related to vertebrate pest management from a research-based technical perspective. So, hey, glad to have you on board. Hope your week went well. I am trying to get some videos done in advance so I can try to get ahead a little bit because, again, still in a little bit of a training season now. But things are kind of winding down a little bit, so it's nothing too bad, but nevertheless, got other obligations I need to take care of as well. But anyways, glad to have you here. And if you're looking for information based on research related to the control of wildlife, well, you've come to the right place, because we cover all things related to vertebrate pests. That's animals with a spine that cause conflicts with between humans and wildlife. So if you want to reach out to me, you can reach me, of course, at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com, wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. If you're interested in being a guest, we'd love to talk to you about that. Do take a few moments if you would, and just do a little quick search for my podcast on being a guest on the show, and it will explain some of the details of what's involved with that way. Sometimes when I invite people on, they have all these questions, and it just got to the point where I just need to kind of address those questions right in advance. So we'd love to have you. We love having guests on our show. We love getting information out. So we'd love to hear from you. Of course, criticisms, comments, thoughts, suggestions for new shows, you can definitely reach me at email or put something into the comments. We would love to have you take a few moments and subscribe to the channel and tell us how we're doing. All right, enough of all that. Let's get on with, I'm going to go back to the series I've been doing on bait stations for rodent control. As you know, as professionals, a lot of us are using bait stations to hold rodenticides because it offers a lot of benefits, of course. It protects the bait against weather, also helps protect the bait against non-target access, right? So we don't want these poisons to go into animals that they don't belong, and bait stations assist in protecting that. Of course, they're not foolproof, they're not perfect, but they're certainly better than just simply willy-nilly putting rodenticides out in the wild, so to speak. And by that I mean unprotected, where any animal. I had one lady call me up once and she said, I put bait on top of the fence in my backyard and now it's gone. What ate it? Literally, that was a question I got. So I'm like, no idea. It could have been any number of animals that would have taken that bait, because a lot of these baits, of course, are very palatable. So a lot of different animals would be interested. So this is what people do when they get frustrated and they're trying to control things, and they often don't follow the directions. But as important as all that is, the series I've been working on is talking about how do we use bait stations better, right? How do we use them to make sure we're attracting? Because one of the challenges with bait stations is they not only protect against non-target entry, they can also be a hindrance for the target animal to interact with it, right? So how do we overcome that? Is one station design better than another? Is there an issue with how we're using bait stations? Is that impacting the efficacy? Because obviously it doesn't do any good to protect your bait if the rodents that we want to eat it are afraid of it, right? If they won't go in. So this is what that series is all about. So I've already done 2 presentations on this. This week we're heading into number 3. So before I get to that, I do want to introduce you to my website, of course. This is the Wildlife Control Consultant website. There's a variety of materials there that can help you do your job better. And then, of course, if you are looking for someone to do some PowerPoint work with you, perhaps you need to do a presentation somewhere, various state of associations, national associations may be having you speak, and you want to make sure you're presenting a good PowerPoint that's visually pleasing and follows a proper educational design, well, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach out to me at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. All right, so let me pull up my slideshow. It's going to be a short one this week, but nevertheless, I think it's going to be very important. So this is part 3, and this week we're going to talk about the role of odor on bait stations. In other words, is a bait station more effective if it has odors or if it's clean, right? So let's pull up that slide. So that's the question. Is it better to have a dirty bait station, all smelly, or is it better to have an unused bait station, right? Now, you may already have an intuitive understanding of which one you think is better, but we want to make sure we confirm. We can't always rely on anecdotal information, right? Because one of the challenges of anecdotal information or personal experience is that if you're not recording things, you often only remember things that are unusual or recent. So we have what's called recency bias, and we tend to remember what occurred most recently, and then we have this tendency of making that more important because it's more memorable. I experienced this when I did some research on pocket gophers. I had the feeling that a particular technique that I was using, I think a particular trap or technique I was using, was more effective than something else. And then when they did the statistical analysis, I was wrong. So it didn't turn out that way. So this is where you have to be careful of just simply relying on your memory. It's why it's so important. If you're trying to really determine if something works or not, you got to keep the records. Problem is, you're busy, right? You're trying to service customers. You're trying to make a living. You're trying to deal with your families. You're trying to have a personal life, of course, and you just may not have the time, right? It's the same problem that I have with people when I try to get them to take pictures, right? They have all these places where they can take wonderful pictures, but they're just too busy to push the lever, or they don't take the photo well enough. So this is the question. Is it better to have a clean station, or is it better to have a used, smelly station, right? You can see the pictures that I have put up there. All right, well, this is the research that was done. It was done by Whittier and McReynolds, and it was done in 1965, so it's not a recent publication. And, different studies come up with different results, but we're looking at this particular article, and that's what I'm basing this information on. So it's not my research. Don't blame me. Don't shoot the messenger. I'm simply summarizing the findings that were in this particular publication. So it's Whittier and McReynolds, published in 1965, and the title of the article is Persisting Odors as a Biasing Factor in Open Field Research with Mice. So they're coming at it, of course, from a research side of things, is because researchers will often go out into the field and set traps to do population studies and this sort of thing. And they're wondering, are traps that have odors in them, are they biasing results? So they want to find out what the true number of rodents are in the field, but if the odors are either repelling mice or if they're attracting mice more, and so you're making more captures than what's actually in the area, then you're getting biased results. And they're trying to find out if there is a biasing with odors in these particular traps. Now, they're using typically Sherman traps, and so if you're familiar with Sherman traps, they're basically solid wall metal traps that are small. They're probably 2 by 2, tend to be about maybe 12 inches long, 10 inches long, something like that. And researchers use them to catch, voles and deer mice and that sort of thing, small rodents. And so they're obviously going to be peeing in there and pooping in there, so their odors are going to be in there. And so they use these traps to do population studies, for example. And so does that trap that's been used by a previous rodent, does it affect the attractiveness of that particular trap beyond what the bait has done? So this is how they did the research. So this is a lab study that they did. So basically they took a box and they put a dividing wall in it. And so they had part of the box where the mouse was not able to get to. And then they had a part of the box that the mouse was able to be in, and they kept the mouse in there for 5 minutes. Then they removed the mouse, okay, and then they would put a mouse, they would remove the dividing wall, put a mouse, a new mouse, not the same mouse, a new mouse, into the borderline between the area that was occupied and unoccupied. And then they would watch the mouse to see which side of the box the mouse spent the most time in. So there's no attractive, there's no food in here, there's no water in here, there's no nesting material in here. It's just simply an empty box. Where does the mouse put its time? And they would watch this mouse for 10 minutes to see what it did. So here's an example. So they removed the first mouse, the mouse that was kept on one side, for 5 minutes. And then they would remove that mouse, put a new mouse in at the borderline to see which side. And then they would time it. And so they would say, so here's what the results were. 61 mice out of the 93 spent more time on the occupied side than on the unoccupied side, at a ratio of 6 minutes to 4 minutes, because they kept the new mouse in the box for 10 minutes. So that's kind of significant. So it basically says that the mice preferred to hang around the part of the box that was occupied by the previous mouse, checking things out. And that's what they ended up finding, right? So that's kind of significant. So in terms of the mouse's desire to linger, they wanted to be in the side of the box where the previous mouse was, okay? Now, then they did an experiment. Is there an effect? Can they wash this away, right? So then they would take this box, and they would wash the bait station with water and then scrub it with a paper towel. So there was no chemicals being used. It was in the sense of, like a bleach or a Lysol or, maybe, Mr. Clean or something like that. They didn't use any of that. All they did was they rinsed out the box with water and then wiped it down. They called it scrubbing, but, it's, I think, wiping down firmly with paper towels. And they did this with 48 times. And what they found is that the mice still liked being on the occupied side of the box even after it was washed with water. The water and wiped down with paper towels at a ratio of 6.23 minutes to 3.56 minutes. So in the unoccupied area, mice stayed about 3.5 minutes. In the occupied side, mice hung around for over 6 minutes, about 6.25 minutes. Again, 10 minutes they remained inside of the box. So what's the takeaway of all this? Well, bait stations that have been occupied by previous rodents are more valuable than fresh, brand new, out-of-the-box bait stations. Okay. Point number 2. If you are cleaning your bait stations, and you probably have to, right? I mean, they can get kind of nasty, right? To be sure. Don't clean very aggressively, right? You can sort of remove some of the macro debris. Sometimes rodents make a nest in there, right? So be careful. Watch your PPE, right? Don't just simply stir up a lot of stuff. We do have deer mice across the country and white-footed mice in about a third of the country. You want to be careful of some of these things. The animals carry diseases, right? So you don't want to be like stirring it all up and getting your face into it and everything. But when you're cleaning, don't clean vigorously, right? Don't go spraying it down with a heavy-duty cleaner and trying to scrub it down and get it back to that brand new, pristine level when you bought it from your supplier, right? Don't do that. Why? Because we want those pheromones to remain with the station, because that's a kind of a clue to let other rodents know, hey, it's good to hang out here. This is a safe space. It's a place with food, that sort of thing. And so this is what they're trying to do. Now, what do you do if you have a fresh bait station, right? So it's brand new. It hasn't been used. It hasn't been used yet. Is there a way to sort of jumpstart this particular process? And the answer is yes. You can take droppings from another bait station and put those droppings inside your fresh bait station to sort of seed it, is the word that they would use. And that would then, those pheromones would be attached to those droppings, and then other rodents would be able to see this as, oh, this is a safe space, or I'm interested in what, maybe was that a female in heat that I smell? And then they would check out that sort of thing, right? And that's basically the takeaway from this particular research done in 1965. So that's some good news there. You don't have to spend a lot of time really bearing down on your bait stations to get them all spot clean. It's not really going to be necessary, and in fact, it could be detrimental in terms of the use of that station in the future. Well, I hope you found that information helpful for you and your business as you're trying to service clients. We are getting into that colder season, so rodents are looking for places to stay inside of structures, and of course, bait stations are going to be part of that mix if your client allows you to use rodenticides on the premises, right? And it's appropriate for in that particular situation. So definitely clean your bait stations, just don't clean them too vigorously, right? We want to make sure those pheromones are around, and then, of course, be careful when you clean because you don't want to aerosolize things and inhale that, so make sure you're watching out for your PPE. I'm Stephen Vantassel. You've been listening to the Wildlife Control Consultant Podcast. Do take a few moments, if you would, to subscribe to the channel, ring the bells. You can be updated about future podcasts. I tend to publish about once a week. And then, of course, if you want to reach out to me, I'd love to hear from you. Comments, thoughts, suggestions for new shows. You can reach me at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com, wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. So if you're looking for information on all things technical related to vertebrate pest management, hope you'd keep this source as a place where you can get that information. So until next time, take care, everybody. This is the disclaimer for Wildlife Control Consultant Podcast. Vertebrate pest control is an inherently dangerous activity involving risk of bodily injury to you, others, and/or property. Vertebrate pest control also involves legal issues, so be sure to always follow national, state, provincial, and local laws when using pesticides and/or other control methods when controlling pests. Wildlife Control Consultant LLC, Stephen M. Vantassel, or their affiliates are not responsible for your use of the information provided here. Always consult a qualified and appropriate professional before employing the information provided here.